At least 11 people are dead and 64 injured after multiple explosions hit Ukrainian cities, including the capital Kyiv. Russia is also accusing Ukraine of orchestrating a powerful blast that damaged a key bridge linking Russia and Crimea. SABC News correspondent Sergio Olmos is in Kyiv and joins us live now. Sergio, thank you so much for your time. What can you see around you?
This is one of the areas where the Russian missile struck. There's a crater just behind me. There's also a crater in an intersection in front of me. I heard both the missiles that hit this area in the morning about 8:20 local time. It sounded like an aircraft. Of course, it wasn't. It was a missile. The busy intersection here. It's Monday morning, rush hour. There was people, of course, walking around. There's a busy cafe here, and I got to see some of those cars, charred out vans, and I actually saw a body laying on the street. And behind me, you see this is a park. There's a children's playground and a historical building behind me, and there's a giant crater where that rocket landed.
You say that you saw one body. Was that the only person affected, or do we know if there have been any other injuries?
No, so they are still, rescue workers are still tallying the number of those dead. We know at least 5. There are, as you said, 11 across Ukraine in different cities, more than 60 injured. Here in Kyiv, the numbers we're hearing now is there are at least 5 dead. I could tell you from that intersection, from what I saw, there were at least 4 cars and 1 van that were completely charred. I mean, they were crisp. They were just down to the chassis. And I saw one body on the floor, but this was somebody who appeared to be crossing the crosswalk. And just to show you how powerful these blasts were, I live a few blocks away. They were very loud, but a coffee shop I counted 1,000 feet, 1,004 feet away had its windows blasted out. That's 1,000 feet away. So this incredibly powerful explosions for the people that were walking nearby or in their cars. I mean, the shrapnel from that is incredibly deadly. And of course, as we know with these strikes, there's the initial count from the explosion, and then there's those that follow who don't make it through the wounds in the hospital.
And some residents, of course, they were, were heading into basements at some point in metro stations, at the sound of air raid sirens. How is the situation like on the ground now? What are they saying to you?
I can tell you here in Kyiv, many people do not go underground or to shelters when they hear air raid sirens. This is a city that it's become akin to Tel Aviv, where there's the threat, but the air defenses here are very good, and it's not like a city like Kharkiv that gets hit almost every night. And so people here really don't adhere to the air raid sirens anymore. That obviously has been totally shattered. Today, when there was air raid sirens, people would go down to the subway stations. They were completely full. I saw people bring their sleeping bags with them, bring their backpacks. There's people bringing stuff for long-term stays. I asked several of them, what's your plan? They said, we think we're going to stay here tonight, but we don't know. The streets are almost empty. The shops are closed. You cannot go to most restaurants or anything like that. They've all boarded up. Their people are being asked to stay home to adhere to the air raid sirens. And I can tell you, I was in Donbass last week. I was in Kharkiv last week as well. I've been to the frontline cities, and I hear shelling quite often. But to see it here, it felt like being back in March here, where people are absolutely, on edge. At the same time, some of those old instincts kicked in. People were holding apartment doors open, even in expensive buildings, so that people could run in for the air raid shelter. People asking, are you okay? Do you need anything?
And that's a question I'm going to ask you, because we saw Trent earlier on also, running for cover and really not being safe at some particular point, and telling us how dire the situation is on the ground. How safe are you where you are right now?
So from some of my sources and the Ukrainians I speak to, my sources are telling me that they're expecting more strikes. Talking to Ukrainians now, just regular everyday people, they also feel the same way. They are expecting strikes to continue through the night, possibly for the next couple of days. There has been a lot of fear following the last couple of days, especially because of the Crimean strike on the bridge. people have been asking, okay, what's the revenge going to look like? What are they going to hit? And people have been also talking about the prospect of nuclear war. People have their plans in place. I mean, everyday Ukrainians you talk to have their people, you know, they have a go bag, they have family, that they have their kind of strategies for how to deal with shelling. I talked to a couple young men who were in the subway underground, and one man was from Saltivka in Kharkiv, which gets shelled very often, and he said, hey, I know what to do. Like this, I know what to do in this situation. I know exactly what to do. Go down to the shelter, wait till the air raid siren clears, get food, get water. And so there's a lot of people who know what to do. That being said, Kyiv does feel like it's a city under attack, and this is the city center. There's multiple spots here that have been hit, and they've been hit hard. I mean, these are very powerful missiles. These are not mortar rounds. These are long. You know, you can see the crater behind me. It is huge.
All right, Sergio, stay safe, and we'll continue to touch base with you throughout the course of the evening. Thank you so much for bringing us that update. That is Sergio Olmos in Kyiv, of course, talking to us about how devastating the situation is on the ground. Let's stay with that story. The United Nations General Assembly will hold an emergency special session on Russian annexations in Ukraine. UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed told SABC News earlier that leaders need to come up with a pathway to peace.
Once the war starts, it's very difficult to stop it, to find the pathways to peace, as lesson after lesson we learn with the different wars around the world, incredibly difficult. And what we hope is that we will have sufficient momentum from leaders to look for that pathway to peace. But in the meantime, we have to deal with the repercussions of the war in Ukraine. As tragic as it is, and that the epicenter is in Europe, the ripple effect of that war, yet again, another crisis, is impacting those who have less, our developing countries. It's impacting them in the socio-economic way, and we have tried at the United Nations to look at the response that's needed, for instance, to address the cost of living, to address fiscal deficits that countries will have in a manner in which will cause debt crisis if we are not able to cushion this with re-looking at the debt restructuring, but also looking at the debt standstill so that we can cope with those fiscal deficits that are required to provide for jobs, for social protection, for health, for education. One of the major initiatives that have been taken up has been the Black Sea Grain initiative, and that one has been to make sure that where we depend on the grains that come out of the Ukraine and Russia, fertilizer that comes out of Russia, that we can get this into the hands of the people that need it most. And while we have succeeded somewhat over the last couple of months, we have also to really think about what is going to happen next year. The planting season is up, the fertilizer is still out of reach for many, the cost of transportation, the energy crisis that we are seeing that is bleeding from Europe into Africa, into other developing countries. So while the challenges are many, all hands are on deck to see how we can navigate through this and come out the other side, hopefully better together.
Is the world still committed to this important concept of multilateralism?
Well, I think evidenced from the just recently concluded UN General Assembly, yes, they are serious, they do understand, and they do turn up in our global town hall at the United Nations to discuss the issues where we are, the reality that is not very good, but the hope and the aspiration that we can do better, trying to close that gap. We had over 100 leaders, heads of state and government that were there and that spoke of their frustrations, of the lack of solidarity for many developing countries, but also of the hope that they could persuade leaders who need to come to the table to make sure that we are not just thinking in isolation of the different pain there is around the world, but that we try to address it all, because we do have the wherewithal. We've never had a world that is more able and does have the resources, but the inequalities, the inequities are huge, and we have to address those. And the only place that you can do that is with international cooperation and with multilateralism. So again, you know, we saw that just recently at the UN General Assembly. It's for us to follow that up, and to follow it up in each and every country, in the regional bodies that carry on with those discussions, and come back again to that multilateral space as we need to solve the problems.